Set, Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss Dynasty strategy, rankings, and all things NFL. So get ready to geek out on fantasy football with your host, Rich Dotson.
And welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Rich Dotson, and my fellow nerds, Matt O'Hara.
Hey.
And Garrett Price.
How's it going?
It's going swell, fellas. This is it. This is the end of the road for a lot of people, usually about half your league. This is week 14 we're entering. That's right, week 14, which is usually the start of the playoff season, but not anymore or going forward. Now that the NFL has added an extra week, week 14 will be the last week of the regular season. We've made it all the way through the regular season. Playoffs are going to start next week. This is where everybody goes all in. They're going for the ship. This is what we play for. And it's finally here. It's amazing how fast every single year these seasons go by. But we are literally just a couple of weeks to dive in and talk rookies for about 8 weeks and sprinkle in some other episodes there. Yeah, so it's an exciting time. You know what I mean? It's like we literally spend an entire calendar year getting ready for this moment. You know, these next 3 weeks of the football season. Yep. And hopefully your league made that move. You know, and you made sure you push your season back and your playoffs aren't starting now. I know Garrett's in a league that they messed that up.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, part of it's because they do like 2-week playoffs. So to get 2 weeks in for each one, they kind of had to start this week.
But fortunately, there's a bye week this week.
I know.
There's buys. That's crazy.
It didn't affect me, so I'm not as ticked as I would be. But otherwise, I'd not be happy. But yeah, we're missing Miami, which isn't a huge loss, but Jalen Waddle, Tua,
wide receiver 1, Jalen Waddle, super flex leagues, Tua.
Yeah,
don't forget about Mike Gesicki as well. I mean, Mike Gesicki.
Yep. The Patriots, so you're missing those running backs. You might be starting Hunter Henry,
Tom
Matt
Brady.
Jones in Superflex. Tom Brady plays for
not Tom Brady.
Not Tom Brady.
And then we have the Philadelphia Eagles. So we have Jalen Hurts, we have
Dallas
Smith.
Goedert off a monster game.
Oh, huge game. And then the biggest blow, if you have Jonathan Taylor, you don't get him for this playoff game.
And Michael Pittman. Yeah, these
Michael
are big-time
Pittman,
players.
Carson Wentz. Yeah.
I would literally quit the league if I was in a playoff game and they started the playoffs and I had players on bye. Especially a guy like Jonathan Taylor, who's literally the king of my fantasy team. You know what I mean? He's a number one overall dynasty player right now. And without him, I don't know, man. To me, that's unacceptable. You can't go into a playoff game at a disadvantage. I would literally say, okay, if I can't play Jonathan Taylor, you can't play
your best player,
your best running back. You know what I mean? It's only where's my made up? Where do I get made up here? This just isn't fair. So hopefully nobody else made that colossal mistake, and they're playing this week. Good luck to all that made the playoffs. Good luck to all the Scott Fish Bowl participants. I ended up finishing 36 at the end of the year. I got the first round bye. I'm real excited. 18 Dynasty Nerds analysts made the Scott Fish Bowl playoffs. So that's pretty nice from the Dynasty Nerds staff, where a majority of those that played made the playoffs this year. I like my team. I hope I have a good shot to win it. Obviously, if you win the Scott Fish Bowl, you go legend forever. There's no way around it. And the only analyst that's won, really, since the early days of Mike Clay, we had Stompy, and Stompy wasn't even really an analyst when he won. He didn't really get on the circuit until after he won. So it'd be nice to see an analyst this winter. It'd be even nicer to see Rich Dotson win this year.
Yeah.
So we're roaring the rides. This holiday season right around the corner, the playoffs start. And listen, as we all know, just because your season may be ending this week, there is no off season in Dynasty Fantasy Football. It's literally 365. And this is where the real work comes in. So this time next year, you're not sitting out, right? You're playing in these playoffs. There's a lot of work to be done here, whether it be trades, whether it be analyzing your team as a whole to see where your holes are, and most importantly, drafting these rookies to put yourself in a good position to win not only next year with guys like Jalen Waddle, Elijah Moore, Devontae Smith. They're coming in this league right away. Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, a big game last week. They can help you win right away.
Yeah,
but for the long haul. And there's no better resource out there right now than DynastyNerds.com to help you do all of that, right? We make sure you have the tools to help you dominate week in and week out. And we have so many more tools on the horizon that are becoming actually this spring and summer to even expand on the Dynasty GM. So what we're doing right now for our podcast listeners only is we're offering all podcast listeners a special discount during this Dynasty holiday season. Sign up for any membership tier and use that promo code WINTER, 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 to receive an extra 15% off. If you're out of the playoffs, start planning for the future by using our Dynasty GM tool to see where your team stacks up. Start getting ready for your rookie drafts with our Dynasty Nerds Rookie Film Room. We cut up the film of all the top incoming rookies so you can watch the tool at top prospects in an efficient way. See each play that the player is on the field without any of the fluff in between each play. That means you can watch an entire game of a rookie in about 5 minutes. You want to see Treylon Burks versus whoever, then you can watch this entire game in 5 minutes to see what we see and how we kind of grade these players. Sign up now. Use that promo code WINTER, and you get an extra 15% off of your membership level, any level that you want, in DynastyNerds.com. That's for our podcast listeners only. So before we get into that today, I want to let you guys know about today's show before we get this next little advertisement here is last week we talked about how crazy it is. I went through those stats of what the first and second year players were doing and where they were fantasy-wise from a scoring aspect at wide receiver. So we were talking about it this week, and we were like, you know what? What if you just had to draft the last 3 years over again? Just those players. Well, what we found out is, because we drafted them today, is one, we did 2 rounds and wasn't nearly enough. There's some players that are going to be blown away that we didn't even get taken. And we realized with this youth movement that you could literally, if you would have owned the last 3 drafts, you could build a dynasty that would dominate for the next 5 years. It's your closest thing. If you ever blew it up at the right time, it's your closest thing to building an all-time dynasty. Yes, Matt, I know you've accumulated a lot of those picks. It's all about following those right windows. So we're going to redraft those 2019, 2020, and 2021 players all over again. And we're going to give you a little bit of injury news. But before we get into that, let me tell you about my friends also over at Thrive Fantasy. Listen, as the season's coming to end, so is the time to have some good action on these games besides fantasy football. And right now, you can come prop up on Thrive Fantasy this football season. Thrive Fantasy is a daily fantasy sports and esports app for player props. With Thrive, you can eliminate those countless hours of research and just focus on those top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game each week. You get to choose the 10 out of 20 available player props to build your lineup. Each prop is assigned a fantasy value for both the over and the under based on how likely it is to hit. Hit the most props and rack up the most points to win a share of the prize pool. And don't forget, you get a 100% instant first deposit up to $100 for new users. So download the Thrive Fantasy app on the App Store or Play Store, or visit their website, thrivefantasy.com, and use that promo code NERDS for that instant matchup and see what else they're going to give you on top. It's a lot of fun. I'm still trying to work out the kinks here, but make sure you get to Thrive Fantasy, use that promo code NERDS, and get on the action. Now, before we get into this mock draft, we do have, honestly, going into the playoffs, we've had a pretty good week when it comes to injuries.
Injuries. I had to fill in for Jared.
Jared's not even here.
I know.
It still happened.
I had to do
David and Njoku went to COVID list today. Keenan Allen's on the COVID list. And then besides that, Logan Thomas, we thought it tore his ACL. Came back, he didn't tear his ACL. He's going to get a second MRI, but he's still likely going to miss significant time. So he's
not
probably
going to
miss
for your playoffs.
Yeah, he's going to be healthy for your playoffs. Kenyon Drake broke his ankle, but if you're starting him in your playoffs, you didn't have a chance. Anyways, Corey Davis is having core muscle surgery. His season is over. Again, not a core player there for a fantasy football championship team.
But a core muscle.
It is a core muscle, though. You need that. Adam Thielen, his ankle, he is a core player there for your fantasy team. His ankle, he's week to week. Let's see if we can get out there this week. And then Daniel Jones likely out with his neck, so Jake Fromm's probably going to play in there. And DeAndre Swift is also out with his shoulder injury, I believe.
Is he going to miss one more week?
Yeah, I think he's going to miss one more week here. So
yeah, they made it sound like that.
Yeah, so honestly, going into bar nobody gets hurt this week, cross your fingers. This was a really good week, relatively. Week in, week out for 13 weeks, we lose a stud, and this week we finally made sure
we ran out. I feel there's not
many left.
There's nobody else to get hurt, man.
Well, yeah. I was nervous for a second. Joe Mixon was down, and he was rolling on the ground, and I was like, oh no, not Joe Mixon now. Yeah. And then he was in 4 plays later, and I was like, oh.
Elijah Mitchell got banged up?
And then there was Burrow too. He dislocated his pinky,
and he said he's playing. So.
Yeah, so he's in.
Yeah, it looked like his pinky went on a donut rampage. He got all fluffy and fat like Homer Simpson out there. I was like, "Whoa, don't!" And it's okay. He's going to play through it. So relatively unscathed. Now, I think we should get into this mock draft, guys.
Let's do it.
Now, this mock draft again is different because we're just redrafting these young players. And already, as soon as we were done, I was like, I want to change some of these guys. And I want to say, I do want to say this before we start, before you go, oh, I can't believe you took player A over player B. You're an idiot. Like, honestly, not from one, and not from two, but from like, I don't know, 7 on down, you're splitting hairs. You know what I mean? Like it gets real close on there on some of these guys. And I had a hard time, but Garrett, you had the 1-1. You're on the clock. And what's crazy is the 1-1 and the 1-2 in this startup draft are my 1-1 and 1-2 in my overall dynasty rankings. So yeah. It's a pretty nice start here. 4 of the top 3 are my top 3. Honestly, these guys are pretty much my top 4, throwing Tyreek Hill, my top 5 dynasty players. So, Garrett, kick us off. You have the 1-1. Going all the way back to 2019, you can take any player that you like. I wonder who you're selecting.
Well, I've been a big fan of the player going back a little ways. And this guy's he's just in a tier of his own right now. And as much as I was tempted by taking a receiver because of the longevity on there, but the hard part is there's nobody like Jonathan Taylor right now. Like he is just in a world by himself. Even as much as I like, Swift, who's my dynasty RB2, they're on different tiers. They're on different levels right now. The stability that he has, the role that he has, I mean, just the offensive line, the weapons around, like everything is just set up for success for Jonathan Taylor. So as much as I was tempted to take a receiver, it just comes down to value. The difference between Jonathan Taylor and, if this was a true mock draft where you only get one slot and I'm bumped down to the end of the second round, the wide receivers that I can get at the end of the second round versus the running backs that I can get at that point, it's night and day. So I thought the gap was just so much bigger with running back. I had to take Jonathan Taylor, and I feel great about it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, without a doubt, he's my 1-1 in Dynasty. You're going back to his rookie, when we were breaking down these rookies, and I went on a huge rant about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I was wrong. It was a huge miss by me. I know, Garrett, you were like, no, it's going to be Jonathan Taylor. I understand your point, and you were right. I was wrong because, I mean, look at it now. I would take DeAndre Swift. I would take probably J.K. Dobbins over Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So that was a massive whiff by me. And it kind of goes to show that I talk about it all the time, like, just stick with the tape, Rich. Like, stick with the tape. Because I had DeAndre Swift 1. I had J.K. Dobbins 2. They were neck and neck. And I let the draft spot kind of, like, just fluff it up. And it was also, it wasn't that, too. It was also, like, when we were watching Clyde Edwards-Helaire tape, we kept saying, like, wow, he's better than I thought he was.
He's gonna be sneaky good, right?
Yeah, and then all of a sudden he lands on it cheap. It's like you get so excited because there's already a player we were kind of excited, kind of like Elijah Moore. You know what I mean? Like Elijah Moore. We have those players every year. It's Cooper Kupp and Terry McLaurin one year that we had rising up our board. We had Elijah Moore last year that kept rising up our board. Michael Pittman the year before for me was rising up my board as well. So it kind of all came in one. But for me, I don't know about you, Matt. I mean, Jonathan Taylor is definitely my clear 1-1 because, like Garrett said, starting off, like, say I took Justin Jefferson 1. What running backs are going to be there later? Like, I'd much rather have Jonathan Taylor and then pair him up with, like, DJ Moore and Terry McLaurin. You know what I mean? Or DJ Moore and Michael Pittman Jr. Something along those lines. Like, I would much rather get Jonathan Taylor out of the way to have that elite tier 1 running back for the next 4 to 5 years and still get 2 really good receivers down the road compared to taking Jonathan Taylor and then wonder what my running back situation is going to look like.
For me, Jonathan Taylor is creeping up. He's just right below Justin Jefferson still because I just think
totally
the wide receiver position, it just lends itself to more longevity. So when I'm doing startup drafts, that's the kind of player I'm looking for. Justin Jefferson, a cornerstone player that'll be on your team for the next 7-8 years, as opposed to Jonathan Taylor, great player, love him. He might be on your team for 3 or 4 more years, and then you're moving on, or he's just not as effective, and he's moving down slots on your bench. You're not on your bench, but in your lineup, kind of. So,
yeah, I think you're splitting hairs there, honestly,
absolutely,
for a startup because I'm all about the receivers as well. And to me, it's just he's so good that I just feel more in the receiver class. It got so young and so deep. I feel okay. But Justin Jefferson, I mean, I had the 1-2 here, and let's put it on the table here. I took Justin Jefferson at 2.
Right.
These are literally my 1-1 and 1-2 in Dynasty startup ranks. I'd be more than happy with any of these guys here. And same thing with Justin Jefferson. Like Matt, you said it he's consistent. He's dynamic. He's young. He's putting up numbers that pretty much only Odell Beckham Jr. put up early in his career. So he's putting up elite Hall of Fame early status numbers. And listen, we've seen this before. I mean, Odell Beckham was off to that start, and all of a sudden he got hurt, a couple injuries, and now he was a shell of himself, starting to slowly dig himself out there in L.A. But I'm with you, man. Like the guys like him, they're going to be a wide receiver 1 for the next 10 years. I mean, sometimes that slips off your tongue. We talk about it all the time here in Dynasty. We're like, oh, he's only got about 2 to 3 more years left. Like, do you know how different your Dynasty team is going to look in 3 years? Like, how many ships are going to win? Yeah. Like, 10. So when you say 10 years, say 7 to 10 years, you could get pregnant, have a child, and he could be talking to you about long division by the time this dude's ready to stop playing. That's how long of a time that is. It literally is a lifetime. Okay, not literally a lifetime, but it's a very long time.
For my 6-year-old daughter, it's a lifetime. So,
yeah.
That's her lifetime.
Thing. If I tell my 9-year-old to go back 7 years, he ain't remembering that, So, yeah, to me, I think Justin Jefferson, obviously Matt has him as his 1-1. Would you have taken Justin Jefferson too, Garrett?
Yep, he would have probably been my next one in this format. I still have Tyreek slightly ahead of him. So Justin Jefferson's my 1-2 at wide receiver, but in just these guys, he would have definitely been the next one. So, but it's just so hard to separate these wide receivers that's why I was glad I was at 1, because I would have had a very hard time separating them. So that made it a little easier on me.
Yeah, when it comes to a situation like that, because I'm with you, like Tyreek Hill is a hard person not to put at wide receiver 1 paired up with Pat Mahomes. But whenever I'm like, I have 2 players in each hand, I'm kind of weighing them out as a Libra on the scales here. If I need a tiebreaker, I'm just going with age. So
Sure.
To me, I'm going to take those 4 years and just walk with them. And like I said, 4 years is a long time in Dynasty. Like it's a long time. So Tyreek Hill is my wide receiver. I think he's my wide receiver 2, and then Chase. But I have him, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb. I have those guys all right there. And honestly, it's one of those situations, again, when you're splitting hairs, there's no wrong answer. You know what I mean? It's just, who do you like? Like Matt's a Justin Jefferson guy. I got no problem with that. Like, I'd be happy with any of those guys. You give me Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill. Like, I'm feeling really good about it. It's just in a startup. Like, anytime if I can get those extra 4 years and get within a 2-point per game equivalent player, I feel really good about that. And then try to hammer home some of those older players down the road. So I did Justin Jefferson. Matt was on the clock at 1-3. Who'd you go with, Matt?
Well, at 1-3, I went for the aforementioned CeeDee Lamb. So, yeah, I mean, like you guys were talking about, Tyreek Hill is ahead of him in my rankings after Justin Jefferson. But, any of these guys, like you were saying, Rich, they're all great picks. But CeeDee Lamb, I think, just too good to pass up at this point. Obviously he's having a little bit of a down year this year, missed some time with injuries, but he's still averaging over 16 points a game, 16 and a half points a game. And he's just a game changer. He's going to be one of these guys that's a wide receiver 1 for, or at least, fighting to be a wide receiver 1 for the most part for the next 10 years. Same ballpark as Justin Jefferson, like you said, also Jamar Chase. So all these guys that are young, stud, cornerstone type of guys for their franchise also make great cornerstone guys for your dynasty team. So I'm guessing none of you guys have issue right now with CeeDee Lamb at 3, right?
No, not really. I mean, it's either him or Jamar Chase. Honestly, it's just kind of splitting hairs with me. I might again, there's no wrong answer.
Both those guys are young. Both of them are dynamic. Both of them have other weapons on the team that are also very good, but they still produce at a really, really high level. So
yeah, I think CD offers a more dynamic athletic profile than Jamar Chase.
I agree. He's better with the ball in his hand. He can do more, I think, after just in kind of open space than Jamar Chase. But Jamar Chase can probably get over the top of the defenses and get deep a little bit better than CeeDee Lamb. So they're just a little bit different wide receivers, but both dynamic and both huge for your fantasy teams.
No wrong answers here. Garrett, you're on the clock at 1-4. Where are you going?
Man, I had a really hard time at 1-4 because it came down to 3 players for me. It came down to Jamar Chase, A.J. Brown, and Deebo Samuel. I really like all 3 of those guys. I think all of them are obviously very young. All of them are very talented players. None of them, are in the perfect situation, but they're all in good situations. Obviously, Cincinnati's amazing, but you guys mentioned it. There are other pieces around, so he's not the only show in town. A.J. Brown, he's been a little banged up, been a little injured, but we've seen 2 years before this year where he's been a monster, and even when he was healthy this year, he played super well. Deebo Samuel, it's not a high-volume offense, but when he gets the ball in his hands, he makes things happen. But he also has a little bit of injuries issues. So I think the injuries were what put me over the top, and that's why I ended up going with Jamar Chase and taking him there. Now, I've not necessarily been like the biggest, I love Jamar Chase. I think he's amazing, but he's such a good wide receiver. We've seen a little bit of a downturn, seen a little downtick over the second half of the season, but that's what we expected. We expected that to happen. He's had some drops. He had a play this week where he probably would have had a 60, 70-yard touchdown, but he bobbled it, and then it got picked off, and it just kind of made for a weird game for him. So I don't think either one of those polar ends are true. I think he's probably somewhere in the middle, which is a top 5 dynasty wide receiver, and he's crazy young, and he's going to be doing it for a long time in Cincinnati. So it was a tough choice for me, but I think the injuries were what ended up putting Chase over the top for me.
Yeah, I just picked this where I went to, but you're right. So, and you're saying the second half of the season had kind of a downtick. We kind of expected it, but at the same time, we're seeing other receivers out there in the same draft class that are having an uptick second half of the season. Elijah Moore is really starting to dominate the fantasy football landscape, NFL landscape. Jalen Waddle has been doing it pretty much since week 1. So as Jamar Chase takes a small step back, other receivers are taking a big step forward. And Waddle and Moore, and even guys that said – where Chase was probably mid-range, I moved him all into my 1-1 because if he's going to do this week in, week out by mid-season, he's the 1-1 easily. Now that he has not done that, he has taken a step back. I've also taken a small step back because you're realizing this isn't the second coming of Randy Moss. He's just a really good elite player.
Yeah, from the week 8 to now. So 5 games for him. That was 6 for some others, but 5 games for him. He is only averaging 10.4 PPR points per game, whereas the first half of the year, he was, I don't remember what the exact number was, but he was averaging somewhere around 20-something points a game. He was just feasting every single week. So it's definitely been disappointing, but I think he's a much better player than he's shown these past 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, I agree there too.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think he came on so hot at the beginning of the season that it's given the defenses time to kind of adjust to him, where these other players kind of had a little bit more of a slow burn, and now they're kind of hitting their stride later on in the season. So we'll see. Defenses will always eventually catch up to these guys, and then it's on them to make the adjustments.
To adjust again, yep.
So we'll see. Hopefully what you want to see out of a guy like Jamar Chase is, now that he had the hot start and he's kind of cooled off a little bit, you want to see him kind of heat up again towards the end of the season, and that'll show that he's learning how to kind of he's playing the professional game at that point. He's zigging when they're zagging type of thing. So we'll see what he does towards the end of the season.
And T. Higgins has been benefiting from this greatly as well, with some big time plays there. So I was on the clock at 1-5, and to me, there's still some dynamic receivers here, and I was really looking at Deebo Samuel and A.J. Brown. I was like, these are 2 guys that I would love to have. And then I was like, again, it comes back to this is such a strong rookie, young class of receivers. But when it comes to running back, these top-tier running backs, like they always do, starts to get pretty thin pretty fast. So I took DeAndre Swift. Going into his injury week 11, he was running back 5 overall in PPR leagues. And another thing here was when Jamal Williams went down, something that Swift hasn't really had the opportunity to do this year was dominate in between the tackles or I wouldn't say dominate, just get the opportunity to run between the tackles. And when he did, he looked fantastic. Flashing with his flashing on the outside, dominating in the short game, in the flat, in the receiving game. And the fact that he's such a dynamic player in that receiving game, he just brings a different aspect to the fantasy football level. They can give you running back one numbers every single week, and I don't have to overly worry about him getting all the touches out of the backfield. And being on the Detroit Lions, a team that probably if you go back to their history forever, but probably over the next couple of years, are going to be playing from behind, from a negative game script, and he's gonna benefit from those short dump-off passes. So to me, DeAndre Swift is just one of those special young running backs that I'd rather grab here now and figure out what receivers I'm going to put around him later, because there's so many good ones left that I'd be able to wait another round and still get a guy that I love. Not like love to put around him. Where once I get past DeAndre Swift, now we're starting to look guys I like, guys like Antonio Gibson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We start getting to that realm of players. And to me, it's just a different tier. You know what I mean? Where the tier difference between DeAndre Swift and Antonio Gibson is much greater than Deebo Samuel and, say, Deontay Johnson. You know what I mean? So that's the way I went DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love the pick for all the reasons you just said. He is one of these guys that he's going to be involved in the passing game. They're starting to get him involved a little bit between the tackles, and he's showing he can do it. So I do like his potential upside. They want to be tough. They want to run the ball there as well and play defense. I feel like that's the way the head coach wants to kind of steer the team. So he's going to have a guaranteed workload for a long time. And like you said, even if they do get in these negative game scripts, he's shown that he's more than capable in the passing game. It's actually something he's very good at. So he's one of these guys that he's young, and he's, as long as he stays healthy, he's been nicked here and there, just little things for the most part. As long as he can stay healthy, the sky's the limit. I don't want to call him an Alvin Kamara type, because I don't think he's quite that involved in the passing game, but he can do a lot of the same things as a Kamara type of back can do.
I mentioned earlier how Jonathan Taylor's in his own tier, and Swift's kind of in his own tier for me as well. It's Taylor's got his own, Swift's got his own, and then we got a big chunk of players that we can discuss and talk about and move around. But those two, for the foreseeable future for me, are probably not moving unless there's a significant injury or somebody just absolutely skyrockets up the board. So I think this was a good spot to take him, because there's a lot more question marks after you get past these two players.
All right, on to my pick. Speaking of question marks, I went with 1/6. I mean, it's not like a huge question mark, but I went with A.J. Brown. Like you had already mentioned, Garrett, dynamic player. When he's in the game and healthy, he's a big play down the field type of guy. He can run with the ball after the catch and make big things happen on short dump offs. He's the bona fide outside X receiver that every team wants. And from a fantasy perspective, he produces at an elite level, wide receiver one type numbers. So there's nothing not to like about him, but it is the nicks and the bruises, and he plays a very physical brand of football, and it lends itself to having these type of runs where he's out 3 or 4 games probably every season. So that's the bummer about A.J. Brown. When he's in there, he's producing at a wide receiver one level, but you got to kind of brace yourself to not have him for 2 or 3 games a year. So it's a very similar story, I feel like, to Deebo Samuel, who we were kind of going back and forth a couple weeks ago on the podcast about. But from a physical standpoint and from a wide receiver standpoint, there's just a little bit more juice in a player like A.J. Brown for me. So that's why I pick him over a guy like Deebo Samuel with a very similar, injury profile.
Yeah, I mean, this is the right pick. You know what I mean? For your dynasty team, this is the right pick. And here's the thing. I'm going to give A.J. Brown this year because there's plenty of players that have had a rough start to their career. Keenan Allen had a rough start to his career with injuries. If you go back to Andre Johnson was the same way, banged up for those first 2 years in Houston for going there. So we've seen this before, and then it plays out pretty damn well in the long run. So I'm going to give A.J. Brown the benefit of the doubt for all the reasons you said, Matt, that big typical X receiver on the outside. But here's the thing. These next two guys, they are risk factors, right, because of the injury. Because if this happens next year, I would just be out completely on A.J. Brown. Because I'll tell you, there's a player here. Now, I didn't even take him next as my next player, but there was a player that I thought about taking over a guy. I even had him ranked. I still have a rookie receiver ranked ahead of him. But a guy like Jalen Waddle, right? Like a guy that's coming in here who's so dynamic and so clearly the number one option there in Miami already, paired up with Tua. That's a player that's probably going to give you wide receiver 1 numbers for sure for the next 6-7 years as well. I mean, Jalen Waddle is a player that I liked a ton when we were breaking down our rookie prospects. I had him as my number 3 easily for a while there. And now what I've seen early, anytime I see these rookies just break out this early, it's such a sign of long-term success. So A.J. Brown is the right pick, but there is, for one guy who was considered at one point going in this year, arguably people thought he was going to be the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy,
sure. Yep.
and had a chance to potentially bounce himself to be the 1-1 in a dynasty startup. Again, he's got some young guys at his heels now because, now we say A.J. Brown going into this year is a no-brainer. A.J. Brown, tier 1, round 1 level startup player. But now you got guys not even older guys, young guys, Deebo Samuel, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Terry McLaurin, Elijah Moore. You could throw Deontay Johnson in there and Michael Pittman. They're nipping at A.J. Brown's heels because there's a lot of uncertainty there right in Tennessee. Ryan Tannehill's kind of take a step back from the play action. Now they've dealt with a lot of injuries, so the team's going to look good, completely different next year. But I am starting to get a little bit more. I mentioned this earlier in the year. I'm starting to get a little bit more nervous about A.J. Brown and his injury history.
Well, you mentioned a player you're nervous about. My next pick is a guy that I'm a little nervous about too, but at some point you just got to take risks on players and take risks on their talent level. And that's where I was at with Deebo. I mentioned earlier it was down to A.J. Brown, Deebo, and Jamar Chase. And Deebo's still on the board here, so I did nab him. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't concerned about some of the same things we're mentioning about A.J. Brown. Deebo's missed quite a bit of time. He's missed time basically every single season. He was doing great this year, and now he's missing a couple of weeks again, and it's not a major injury. It's not a super significant injury, but it is holding him out. But despite missing some time, he's still number 4 overall this year in PPR points, and on a per game basis, he's number 2 overall. So when he's been on the field, he's just been absolutely electric, and he's doing it in ways that are not conventional. We're talking about somebody that's not making these big, long down the field plays. It's a lot of stuff that's underneath, and then he's making plays with yards after the catch. We're talking about a team that's not this high-octane, high-passing volume offense, but he's still making it happen. So when somebody can be that efficient with lower touches and limited touches, it's just truly special what type of player and what type of athlete he is. If he misses 2 or 3 games a year, I can live with that. That's not the end of the world. Almost any player is going to miss a game or 2 every season. When it gets to the point where he's starting to miss half the season or long-term IR, that's what I'm concerned about. So there's definitely a layer of risk with taking Deebo here, but the talent is just too good for me to pass up at this point.
Oh, I agree 100%. This is a guy you can't pass up here. We said it before, you could start mentioning him with A.J. Brown easily because you mentioned it, Garrett. He didn't play last week, still wide receiver 4. And a bye week he's had. So it's 2 weeks he's missed, still wide receiver 4. So there goes your 2 games. Going into week 12, he was wide receiver 2 overall. And when you talk about Deebo Samuel in his rank set and where he goes in a dynasty startup or where you have him overall valued, this is a player that's going to get re-signed to a long-term deal. He's the best weapon San Francisco has.
Yep.
And the way you got to look at it is, there's a reason that Christian McCaffrey was the 1-1 for so long. There's a reason that Austin Eckler dominates at his position because they're dual purpose. You know what I mean? You get that pass catcher running back who also gets the carries between the tackles. They can become elite first-round startup players, right? Saquon Barkley, guys like that become so elite. What we don't see I mean, we saw Cordero Patterson do it this year, but he just converted to running back. He's not both. We don't ever see a receiver that gives you both of those outlooks. He's going to get 5 to 6 carries out of the backfield. And not only is he going to get 5 to 6 carries out of the backfield, he's going to look pretty damn good doing it. And on top of that, those 5 or 6 carries, probably about 2 of those are going to come in the red zone.
As I say, they're all high quality. They at least they seem to be.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
This is a player we loved coming out. We gave him a first-round grade his rookie year because the big thing we said about Debo is when it's funny how it's all come back in full circle, too. It's like when this is a player, you get him in the ball in his hands, he becomes a running back.
Yep.
And when we hammer that about how the way he played, and here he is looking like a running back. And to me, Garrett, at 1.7 behind – again, when I said A.J. Brown, it's getting close here, and I said that was the right pick. Man, it's kind of hard to pass up a guy like Debo Samuel who, again, on a points per game basis, they're going to be pretty close. When somebody's giving you 23 points per game, I mean, that's elite tier 1 first-round startup kind of player on a week-in, week-out basis. And that's where Debo is. And, I mean, any team that has him is lucky to have him. And he's going to be tied to – the only thing – here's the thing. Like, how is it going to change when Trey Lance is the quarterback? That's the only question mark with Debo at this point, besides staying healthy. You know what I mean? It's like, does that change at all when Trey Lance becomes quarterback? I sure hope not.
I don't think it'll change too terribly much. We're talking about a quarterback that's a good athlete, so maybe there's a couple red zone runs that he doesn't get, maybe. But I think that would be the only thing. We're not talking about moving from this incredible quarterback to a dud. We're talking about Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, he's fine. He's a game manager. So I don't think it's going to change too drastically.
I'm with you there. I don't see Samuel's role changing all that much with the change in quarterback, unless he's just horrible. You know what I mean? Like they could move on, from Jimmy G, and all of a sudden this lower division guy just can't get it done. Obviously that would affect anyone's value. But as long as he pans out, I don't see Debo Samuel's his value tanking when they move quarterbacks.
Do you think there's a case for Debo Samuel to be a first-round Dynasty startup player?
I think
in one QB, I think it's very close.
QB, yeah.
We're looking at. I mean, I would still assume Tyreek Hill's going to be in this mix, but I don't know that there's any other receivers outside of these players that'll be in the first round. I think Devontae Adams is probably too old at this point.
Is Diggs still up there
maybe
for you guys?
He would be a fringe one. I probably would. I don't know how everyone else feels about him. Hopkins is too old at this point. He's round 2 or maybe even round 3 for some people. So there's not a ton of other receivers. And then when we look at running backs, Christian McCaffrey's probably in this group. You can make arguments for like Mixon or Eckler. But I think people are going to be nervous about taking some of these older running backs at this point. Maybe Barkley, but he hasn't, even when he's been back, he hasn't looked amazing. And that was something we worried about with how bad his offensive line is. So at this point, I do think he's probably right around that turn there.
Okay. I'm back on the clock here at 1.8, and again, a real tough situation. I almost went Jalen Waddle here. But then I was like, you know what? I'd still probably take Devontae Smith over Jalen Waddle, even though that's getting very close for me. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go third running back in a row here because the pickings are getting
team running back. Look at this guy.
And I took Najee. I don't need to go in depth about it because I've beaten this horse a ton. We've kind of talked about Javonte Williams and Najee Harris back and forth. And the tough part, I will say, is watching Javonte play this past week. He looks so unbelievable, in a pass-catching game, in between the tackles. And to me, it just came back down to, again, like, I'm going to take the guy that I know is getting all the carries all day, every day, who's viable in the passing game, and who they're probably going to build this team around after Ben Roethlisberger leagues if they can't find a suitable quarterback. So I took Najee Harris, running back, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I think this pick is totally justified at this point. Like we'd mentioned, we're flush with wide receivers coming out this past 3 years. So to be able to gobble up a guy that's, at one point he usually had like 98% of the snaps or something at running back. I know that was earlier in the season, but you mentioned he's got He's got an ironclad. He's locked in as the workhorse there for the Steelers, and they want to run the ball, and that's exactly what you're looking for if you're going to have a guy that's a volume type of back, which I feel like Najee Harris is. He's a volume back, but he's also capable in the passing game. So he really does bring a nice skill set from a fantasy standpoint, and they love him there in Pittsburgh. So right now, I think is a good spot to take him.
He's running back 5 overall in PPR leagues. So it's like you're not – again, it's not like I'm picking – I'm here. Here we are. I pick 1-8 of just the first 3-year players, and I'm getting running back 5 overall. I mean, that's elite tier kind of player there. So, yeah, that's where I went.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have no issue with that one either. I think the volume is just so safe. Specifically, the rushing volume is just so safe that you can bank, even if things go terribly wrong, even if they go worst case scenario, you're still looking at a low end RB1, high end RB2, and that's if things go really bad. And anytime you can have that type of safety net for the next 3 seasons, 4 seasons, you have to feel pretty good about that. So as much as I'm not the biggest Najee supporter, if it got to me, I wouldn't let him get out of the first round of this. So I think this is a justifiable pick.
Awesome. All right, so I was on the clock next at 1-9, and I ended up going with Devontae Smith from Philadelphia. The rookie obviously hasn't had, I think, the start of his career that everyone had hoped or that I had hoped, but he's flashed and shown the amazing ability to separate that he always did in college. He's a great catcher of the football as well. So I think it's just a matter of time with a guy like Devontae Smith, and I'm willing to take a guy where I see the upside. Maybe we haven't seen it on a week in and week out basis on the NFL level yet, but I think with better quarterback play and kind of the evolution of this offense a little bit, he has emerged as the best wide receiver threat easily on the team, and it's just a matter of time before he kind of develops into that guy. I think he'll end up being a low end wide receiver 1. That's kind of where I see him, but I bet you there's years where he gets higher than that. I think that's kind of where he settles and lives most of the time. And at this point in the draft at 9, in this 3-year window that we're working with here, I think that's a great value and get a really high upside player.
Yeah, and for the reasons you said, Matt, it was where I still have him a hair over Jalen Waddle. And the only thing I'm nervous about all this, guys, is like, are we all just kind of like under appreciating like what Jalen Waddle is already doing through the first 13 weeks of the season?
Sure.
I mean, look where we took Jamar Chase, right? How high he went and where he was in overall dynasty ranks. Know who has more fantasy points in the season? Now, again, it's very slim. It's only one. It's not even. It's 0.5 more points, but he's got 0.5 more points than Jamar Chase on a year. Jalen Waddle is currently wide receiver 10 overall. 10 overall in PPR leagues. That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm still with Matt though. Like, I love the upside of the player in Devontae Smith. He's just so smooth. His route running is so good. He's just always gonna be consistently getting open. So, like Matt said, as this offense evolves, like, he's got the skill set to be there. It's just make sure you get him the ball. And there's a nugget that came out a couple weeks ago on that last drive when they were driving, and he's like, "I want throw me the ball this drive." And they didn't even look his way, and he was pissed.
Yeah, he was mad. He was mad. Yep.
And I love that. I love that. As here he is, this is like week 10, week 11 of the season. He's going, hey, put the ball in my hands. We're going to win this game. They don't, but hopefully it's a lesson learned. You know what I mean? Like, don't throw to Jalen Reagor twice and let the ball go through his hands. Give it to Devontae Smith, who we know are going to catch the football.
Right. I'm shaking my head for the people on the podcast.
Yeah, me too.
So we're splitting hairs again, but like, not only do it, we'll wait a minute here, and I'll say it in a minute here, because I like to pick too here of Devontae Smith, but Garrett was up next, and he took a player again that's might be undervalued here.
Yeah, I thought for sure Matt was going to take this guy. I thought for sure Javonte Williams was going to be gone here at pick, what am I at, 10?
I don't know if you've noticed, Garrett, but You and I are both really big Javonte Williams fans,
right?
But I have a tendency to just let you talk about him because I know you like him just like a hair more than me, and you get so animated and excited.
I do.
So I was just like, I'm gonna let him have it. I'm gonna go Devontae Smith. I think they're close enough players. I'm just gonna let Garrett have his moment. So go ahead, have your moment.
You're so sweet.
Yeah.
No, this past week was, as much as you love a player, and there's been very few players I've loved as much as I've loved Javonte Williams. But when you really love a player and, you watch them go out there and dominate the way that he has most of the season, but not get as much run as you think he should, you start to question. You're like, is everyone else seeing what I'm seeing, or am I being biased because I'm such a big fan of this player? Like, all the metrics line up and say that he should be really good, but why isn't he getting more touches? I don't know. And then he gets this opportunity in prime time to be able to go out and just be the guy. And in a situation where that entire offense looked terrible. Like, Teddy Bridgewater couldn't do anything. There was almost no passing game whatsoever. They knew that they were going to continue to run the ball.
Cortland Sutton, I'm still looking for him.
Where'd he go?
Where'd he go? There you
go. And they just still couldn't stop him. I mean, every single play you're seeing him break. Looks like a 2-yard run. Oh, he split 2 defenders and then fell forward for another 3 yards, and now it's a 7-yard gain. And you just see that over and over. He looked very viable in the passing game as well. I get the people on Twitter right now because there are people saying, is Javonte Williams overhyped? Is his value just unsustainably high? And honestly, it probably is. Like, it's ridiculously high right now. As much as I love Javonte, I don't even know that I could pay the price it would cost to go buy him today because it just isn't worth it for running backs. But that being said, the ceiling is the roof. Like, this is
Jonathan Taylor.
Absolutely. If he gets that full workload, and heaven forbid they get Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson or somebody there in the offseason, I mean, the ceiling truly is the roof. So to get him at 10, I was really excited. And Matt, thank you for giving me that opportunity to talk about my boyfriend.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the old running back Michael Turner when he was behind LaDainian Tomlinson.
Sure.
And we were just itching for him to get opportunity. And I don't know if I'm speaking at school. Like, I believe Michael Turner rewarded us with 1 year as wide receiver 1 or running back 1 overall.
Yeah, but he had 2 or 3 really good seasons there for Atlanta. Yeah. You might be right. He might have been 1 or close to
1 overall. I think he had 1 year. And I know it was short-lived, but he was also stuck behind LaDainian Tomlinson for 4 years, where Javonte's only going to be stuck behind Melvin Gordon for 1 year. Not even stuck, but sharing time with him for 1 year. And even this game here, again, they couldn't get anything going in the passing game. It's his first start, primetime TV, so he's probably pretty jacked up as well. I want to see how it plays out. But, again, this is a guy who has Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook type, Austin Eckler type, ceiling. You know what I mean? Like, it's an elite tier 1 ceiling where this could be tremendous value. I was thoroughly impressed with Javonte Williams. And, yes, I would take him over Travis Etienne today. That's a pretty safe bet. So I'm on the clock here at 111. Again, I'm taking Jalen Waddle. I've mentioned him multiple times on this podcast because it's just one of those players where an overpay today is an underpay tomorrow. Like, I'm getting those vibes where when I told everybody to go buy Devontae Adams before Devontae Adams was like that elite tier 1 guy. That's kind of that's where I'm getting. It's like, man, like let me put it this way. Every receiver that I took over, I didn't take any receivers. That was my first receiver. Every receiver that you guys chose over Jalen Waddle, I felt a little dirty about, and I felt a little disrespected for Jalen Waddle. Not saying that's the wrong pick, you know what I mean? But it's like, I could look ahead, 5 years from now, and going, Waddle was the pick. Over Chase, even. You know what I mean? Like, Waddle's the guy here that should have went because – and here's the thing. I think, Javonte Williams, you mentioned, his price has gone through the roof. Like, that juice isn't worth the squeeze. I'm wondering, not in every league, but I'm wondering if there's some leagues where you could still get Jalen Waddle. Now, will it be cheap? Oh, no, it won't be. You're going to pay up a pretty penny. But you know what? When you pay up a pretty penny, that's the only reason we got jobs, so we can make more pennies. You know what I mean? It's like, go out there and pay the price for a guy like Jalen Waddle. I'm telling you, man, like there's a lot of guys on this list I'd pay a high price for, but I'm paying 2 first plus for Jalen Waddle. You know what I mean? And I feel comfortable doing it. Like, I like Devontae Smith a lot, and I would take him ahead of Jalen Waddle. This is crazy to say, right? Like, I feel more comfortable with the situation Waddle in is what he's shown me, where I'd pay a little bit more for Waddle. Is that stupid? Does that sound stupid?
No, because I mean I think as the weeks go on, I like his quarterback situation there more and more than Devontae Smith. Who knows? I mean Gardner Minshew came in and looked, I thought, pretty good behind that line in that same offense. And Jalen Hurts, who knows? I feel like he's come a long way, but Tua, I feel like, is really starting to click there, and that's where I feel like, who knows, man? Jalen Waddle in a couple of years might be the better asset to have on your dynasty team, just because of that, because he's in a better offense with a better quarterback that gets him the ball quickly and lets him do his thing. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's crazy, Rich.
All right, Matt, give us your 112. I can't believe we're already almost 50 minutes through the show.
I know.
All these players are just so fun to talk about.
And we have a whole other tier to do, so we're going to have to unfortunately, we're going to have to kind of rush through the second round.
Yeah.
Here we can't be as elaborate. We still got a read to do here. Matt, give us your pick at 112, then we'll recap the first round and
all right,
start round 2.
So 112, I couldn't get out of this thing without at least picking one tight end, so I went Kyle Pitts. Obviously, this is the guy that profiles as the wide receiver in a tight end's body type of guy that, all of us hope and pray that he turns into a Travis Kelce guy. He's already showing pretty well. He's already he's right around 10.5 points a game right now. And he hasn't even approached his ceiling athletically. I mean, he's still getting used to the NFL game. It takes tight ends 3 years. And here he is. He's already a tight end 1, getting you over 10.5 points a game. So I just felt like Kyle Pitts, 3 years from now, this might be one of the steals of this first round, to be honest.
Yeah, overall, I mean, you mentioned, Matt, tight ends take 3 years to usually develop. Really good tight ends you get second-year production out of, which I expect Kyle Pitts to do. You said it. A lot of people are saying, hey, he's kind of having a disappointing year. But you're talking about tight end number 9 overall and a 12-point overall differential between being tight end 4 overall. He's literally one catch and 50 yards for a touchdown from being tight end 4 overall. So I love the pick. And that's definitely not a wrong answer. To recap the first round, it went Jonathan Taylor, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, DeAndre Swift, A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, Najee Harris, Devontae Smith, Javonte Williams, Jalen Waddle, and Kyle Pitts. If you haven't heard one of your favorite top 3 or one of your favorite players from the first 3 years of the draft, don't worry. We have a whole other 12 players to get here.
All right, and I'm going to talk about our friends over at PredictionStrike.com. Do you ever wish you would have had a share in maybe Jalen Waddle, maybe Javonte
Williams, perhaps?
maybe Jonathan Taylor, a couple, early on in the season. If you wish you could have done that, you can still do that for some of these young rookies or guys that you think are going to break out over at PredictionStrike.com. You get to treat these players just like they're stocks. You can buy, sell, hold different players. Best of all, they have the website and the app for iOS, and you can get a free share of any player with your first deposit using promo code Dynasty. That's right. You can receive a free share of any player you want with your first deposit of $20 or more over at PredictionStrike.com. Just use promo code Dynasty.
Nice. Now, like we said, we're at 55 minutes almost here. We got to kind of power through the second round, so a little quick takes here. Garrett, you're up first, 2-1. Where are you going?
I'm gonna touch on it at the end, but you could make a fantastic team out of players that we're not even going to get to in the second round. So it's absolutely wild who you can still get in the second round and even after the second round. But I'm going to go with Terry McLaurin here. I had a hard time deciding between, there's some young running backs, there's still some very good receivers, but I think Terry McLaurin has already proved that he can be this alpha wide receiver regardless of the quarterback situation. He's such a burner, and if they do figure out who their guy is, I mean, he could absolutely ascend. I really like Terry McLaurin a lot, and I'm happy to get him in the second round.
Yeah, that's a really nice pick. Yep.
All right. I'm up at 2-1 or 2-2, and I really want to go Elijah Moore here. I did, because I love him so much. And everything I saw on tape that got me so excited about him, he's now starting to actually produce in the NFL. But here I went again with another running back. I took J.K. Dobbins. And the reason
Team running back. Look at this guy.
Listen, he's on the Baltimore Ravens. It's a run-first team, right? And they're still desperate for that elite running back. And I made the mistake of, letting some slip by me, like with DeAndre Swift, right? Where the tape was there, and I let either draft status or situation let other players sneak ahead of him. Well, going back to J.K. Dobbins' tape, the talent's there. This is a running back prospect that I absolutely love. He's going to play this year when he's supposed to be the featured guy because of the ACL tear, but he tore it so early he's going to be 100% healthy for the start of next season. ACL tears have come leaps and bounds from back when, somebody saw he's been hot news lately, like Kajana Carter. So, to me, as much as I love Elijah Moore, much as I love Michael Pittman Jr., as much as I like DK Metcalf, well, as much as I can handle DK Metcalf, after J.K. Dobbins, to me, there's another drop-off at the running back position, right? Like, significant. If his tape translates to what I think it will at the NFL level, and there's no point of going through 8 months of scouting and breaking down players and studying them if you can't live by what you believe, right? And I feel comfortable enough over these last 8 years of breaking down rookies besides telling people to draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire over Jonathan Taylor, besides that, I feel pretty damn good about what my eyes see on tape and where I end up overall on these players. And even a couple guys like, Ramondre Stevenson this year is a guy who I kind of like that's, showing out pretty well. Yep. So I'm sticking with the tape. I'm taking J.K. Dobbins. I think he'll dominate the touches next year. I think they still have to ease up on Lamar Jackson. Here's the thing. Every single year that Lamar Jackson's in the league, every year a little bit longer, they're going to have to ease up a little bit more in that running the football of him. So it all bodes very well for J.K. Dobbins, so I went J.K. Dobbins. Matt, you are on the clock.
All right, I'm on the clock at 2.03. I also really wanted to take Elijah Moore, and then I didn't. I ended up going with DK Metcalf. I just saw the name on the board, and I felt like I couldn't believe he wasn't taken already. So I took him. Does that make sense? I mean, it does. I think none of us are like huge DK Metcalf. Truthers. Yeah, I think that's the word. Because I am a fan. I think he's a good player. I think he's a great fantasy asset to have on your team. It's not going well right now for him. So obviously that's recency bias, which may have taken him down this far. So he's got elite upside. I just don't know exactly who his quarterback's going to be next year. And I do feel like he was a player that him and Russell Wilson fit together really well. I'm just not sure if Russell leaves, if whoever else's quarterback is going to fit really well there with DK Metcalf. So as much as I picked him, I kind of don't want to pick him, but I did. So DK Metcalf right here, 2.03. I don't love the pick. I probably, if I had to do it again, would have picked Elijah Moore, but I didn't.
I would take Elijah Moore over him as well, too, man. And I think Matt, I think you hit the nail on the head there because with DK Metcalf, you gave him in the long run. We talked a lot of smack on DK Metcalf, breaking him down as a rookie. But in the end, he found himself at the back end of the first round of the overall rankings at like 112. Well, and then when he came to the NFL, he started doing really well. We said, wow, the one thing we didn't really we underestimated was how good Russell Wilson's game and him match up. And you mentioned that, Matt, just right now. And that's the biggest concern. Russell Wilson most likely will not be back in Seattle next year. That's where all the arrows are pointed. So, like you said, if he leaves, they already have Tyler Lockett on a long-term contract there. What does that do for DK Metcalf? Can he overcome? Sure, possibly. But it's a red flag where I'd rather just say, hey, give me Elijah Moore. So You're on the clock, Garrett. Who'd you go with?
Well, I actually did take Elijah Moore. All you guys him-hawing over here.
What a pick! Best deal, best bargain of the whole draft.
I would have taken him. I would have taken him at least one pick earlier. Fantastic.
At least one. No, I was torn because there's a player that I took with my next pick that I was actually going to take here because I think he's an incredible value at that point. But it was a little bit of gamesmanship because I was like, there's no freaking way Elijah Moore makes it to me my next pick. This next guy they don't love, so maybe I got a shot at it. But Elijah Moore, he looks so good. I mean, he's been scoring touchdowns like crazy, and I know that's not necessarily sustainable, but he's been getting in the end zone. Him and Zach Wilson look like they're finally starting to figure each other out a little bit, which is super, super exciting. He's such a freaking good route runner. He's so smooth with the ball in his hands. And I just don't see a scenario that he's not a top 16 receiver for the next 8 years. I mean, it's just it looks pretty foolproof right now. He's so talented. I was excited to get him.
Yeah, I love the pick, Garrett, because to me, when I'm looking here, there's what's left. Like a lot of good players left, right? Like really good players.
Yeah.
There's only 3, in my eyes, top-tier players left. And that was Elijah Moore, Michael Pittman Jr., and Deontay Johnson. And I was looking at those guys, and I was like, who do I want to go with? And I ended up taking Michael Pittman Jr. here next over Deontay Johnson. And it was really close. And you could make an argument Deontay Johnson should have gone much higher than even where he's about to go. First round. There'd be no argument if he went like 112, right? There's no argument there if you took Deontay Johnson over Kyle Pitts. I'm like, okay, good pick. But, with the uncertainty of Big Ben, where they're going there, do they switch this offense to a run-first offense with Najee? He still has Chase Claypool there. Pat Freiermuth will develop a little bit more too. So to me, I went Michael Pittman Jr. because he has a more clear path with the quarterback in Carson Wentz. And he's got no competition. And do I expect them to add a receiver this offseason, whether it be through the draft or free agency? 100%. But right now, there's one person to throw the football to, and that's Michael Pittman Jr. Yeah, they got Zach Pascal. Yeah, they got T.Y. Hilton. But for 2022, it's going to be the Michael Pittman Jr. show, and he's already balling out with elite fantasy numbers here. And listen, Deontay Johnson, top tier. A little bit more of a question mark about where it's going, but Michael Pittman Jr. is wide receiver 14 overall. Deontay Johnson, wide receiver 7 overall currently, which is twice as good. Splitting hairs. I don't need anybody tweeting me like, I can't believe you didn't take Deontay Johnson. Splitting hairs. I just slightly prefer Michael Pittman Jr. by a micropube. Hair.
All right. So I'm up at 2.06, and I finally did it. I finally drafted myself a running back. I went Clyde.
Hey, there you go.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
No way I'm taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire over Deontay Johnson. Terrible pick.
And here's the deal. I also had Deontay Johnson. We were talking about this before the show, and he was the guy that I was kind of going back and forth with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, where Edwards-Helaire, I think, has room to grow and I think become a bigger piece of the passing game there in Kansas City moving forward because there's a lot of meat still on that bone.
Saw a piece of it this week.
Yeah, just a little bit. But Deontay Johnson, I'm just slightly concerned. I love him as a player, and I wanted to take him here, but with Big Ben's imminent departure from professional football, and definitely from the Pittsburgh Steelers after this year, I'm just not exactly sure who's going to be throwing Deontay Johnson the ball next year, and whether or not it's going to be the same kind of offense that it is now, which Deontay Johnson has excelled in and looked amazing, or if it's going to be a more run-centric offense that kind of features the running back and an emerging tight end, which both of those things kind of lend themselves to having higher usage with a young quarterback, which is, I think, the direction that they're going to end up going there in Pittsburgh. So I wasn't, this wasn't like, hey, I need Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think he's a good running back, and I think he can do better than he has, which I mean, he's not doing terrible. Everyone thinks Clyde Edwards-Helaire is doing terrible. He's still averaging, double-digit points per game. He's missed some time. He's had a couple of really clunker games in there. But if you're getting 12 to 15 points from a guy on a regular basis at your running back 1 or running back 2, you feel pretty good about it. And at this point in the draft, I feel pretty good about getting Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Just Deontay Johnson was kind of in the back of my mind, but I couldn't take him just for the reasons I already said with Big Ben's uncertainty.
Yeah, I feel like Clyde Edwards-Helaire is about to become the new Melvin Gordon, like the best value. Right. Just consistently one of those. He'll get traded a lot in leagues. Everybody's always going to be out on him. It's always going to be the year like, oh, this is it. He's nothing. But every year it gives you really good numbers year in and year out. You're like, oh, on a per game basis, he's only averaging 3.7 yards per carry. Yeah, but was he a running back one? Yeah. Okay, cool, sweet. Have a good year. I'm gonna go sign up my ship. So, yeah, that's how I feel about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but I still would have taken Deontay Johnson ahead of him. Garrett, you're on the clock.
Well, all this Deontay Johnson talk, once again, I was the guy that actually did take him. I took him.
What a deal.
What a bargain. I get him all the way back at 207. I'm not as concerned about the quarterback situation because I don't think it's going to get that much worse. Ben looks like a shell of himself. He does not look like the same guy that we saw 3-4 years ago before the elbow injury and all those things. So I don't think it's going to get that much worse for Deontay Johnson, so I'm not going to worry about it. Right now on a per-game basis, I mean, he's averaging 18.6 points per game. That's sixth best overall on a points-per-game basis. That's better than Chris Godwin, Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen. It's incredible how well he's been playing. So,
Rich, you okay?
I'm still going – what's that?
Is it Richie okay? He's making noises.
Those numbers are so good.
All right, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, Garrett.
No, you're good. I'm not the biggest Deontay Johnson fan per se. I don't have a ton of shares, but he's somebody that just seems to get overlooked too often, and it just screamed value.
Well, like falling to 2.7?
Yeah.
in a limited pool. No, it's a great pick here. I'm gonna collect next year at 2.8, and this is a player that I was surprised is still on the board, and it kind of caught me off guard because you could argue take this guy going all the way ahead of DK Metcalf. Honestly, you could probably argue taking this guy ahead of J.K. Dobbins. You could take him ahead of Kyle Pitts. You could make an argument taking him ahead of Terry McLaurin. I could put him all the way back up to like 111. That's Justin Herbert. Right? First quarterback off the board. Justin Herbert already in his second year. It's his second year. Know where he is fantasy quarterback-wise? He's quarterback number 2 overall, just behind Tom Brady. Right there. So at a position that literally, whether it be Superflex, and this is 1 QB, but even in 1 QB, the players that score the most points are the quarterbacks on a week-in, week-out basis. And when you have an elite quarterback that's a top 5 quarterback year in, year out, they can really lighten the load on your way to the playoffs, right? They got the cure for chlamydia on the Oregon Trail. Like, they're ready to go. Oh, no, it wasn't
Dysentery.
Dysentery, something.
Same
it definitely
thing.
wasn't
Same
chlamydia.
thing. Yeah. In one hole, out the other. You know what I mean? Dysentery. So to me, Justin Herbert here.
What kind of squirrels are you shooting, man?
Oh, the fat ones with the big nuts, so I'm hungry on the Oregon Trail. So to me, I mean, Deontay Johnson was great value, but if I'm going the number 2 overall quarterback this late, and it's so easy in 1 QB to overlook the quarterback, because if this was a Superflex draft, he'd be the 1-1.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He'd be the 1-1 in a Superflex draft. So it would be really funny if we did this in a Superflex. If we did a Superflex where Trevor Lawrence would have gone. That'd have been an interesting topic amongst these players. But Justin Herbert right here, number 2 overall fantasy quarterback on the year, entering week 13. I love it here. Screams value. I got all these running backs. I got one receiver in Jalen Waddle. He's the only receiver I need. And now I got Justin Herbert. Gobble, 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 gobble.
Gobble, gobble. Rich just shot a turkey, but he can only carry 90 pounds of meat. Oh, no. Oh, no.
It's going to spoil.
I mean, good pick, man. Justin Herbert is obviously a stud quarterback. I'm going to move on here and make my next pick here at 2.09. I'm going Jerry Jeudy. I honestly can't believe he's still sitting on the board. When I saw him up there, I was pretty surprised. Obviously, he hasn't had the start that we all had hoped, but he's flashed enough to show me that he has the ability to be the big play guy, and it's evidence enough that, you know, obviously Cortland Sutton's numbers have fallen off a cliff since Jerry Jeudy came back. They want to feature him in that offense, so he's going to be the centerpiece, I think, moving forward. They did obviously sign Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick to extensions. So they're keeping that whole kind of core together, and I think they're just trying to make it attractive for a quarterback in the offseason. Hey, these are all our weapons. highlighted, I think, by Jerry Jeudy as the guy. So Jerry Jeudy, now to get him at 2.9, to get a team's wide receiver 1 of the future, I just think it's too easy. It's kind of a layup here.
No, I think it's a good pick. At 210, I took Antonio Gibson. Gibson started off the season pretty slow. There was, the stuff with his shin going on. He had some fumbles. Things just weren't looking great. But he's really stepped it up the past few weeks. He's been involved more in the passing game. He's looked great between the tackles, and he's looking like the player that he did at the end of last season. So he still has yet to put together a full season, but we've seen 2 seasons now where he's had stretches of really, really great play. That's enough for me to take a chance on the upside of Antonio Gibson. They don't have a crazy amount invested in him. He was a 3rd-round pick a couple years ago. They could absolutely move on at some point, but this isn't the draft that you're going to be getting tons of amazing running backs. I think he's better than anybody in this class this year, with the exception of maybe one player, and I doubt that they think that that's a priority for them. There's a lot of other positions of need, so I think his job's pretty safe for at least the next 2 seasons. I'm going to take Antonio Gibson here.
All right. Well, I thought I could start a trend when I took Justin Herbert. Obviously, I couldn't. So here at my last pick of this draft, I'm taking Kyler Murray. Again, it just screams value, right?
Right.
Justin Herbert is the number 2 overall quarterback in fantasy football points. He's number 3 on points per game basis. Number 1 on points per game basis. Again, it's pretty marginal here, but it's Kyler Murray. He's quarterback 13 a year. He's only played 9 games. But on points per game basis, he's averaging 23.95 points per game in PPR leagues as a quarterback. That's good for number 1 overall fantasy quarterback on per game basis. He's right ahead of Tom Brady. The only people averaging 23 points or more are Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Tom Brady, and Kyler Murray on a points per game basis, with Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts right on the outside there looking in. So to me, again, a player that can carry my team to the playoffs, and that's Kyler Murray. Great value this slate. I'll find pieces later. Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I was actually grappling between picking my next player and Josh Allen, but I ended up going in a different direction. So Josh Allen did not get chosen. But
Josh Allen shouldn't have been in this class. I saw that on the sheet. He was in Baker and Lamar and all them's class.
You're right.
Yeah, he shouldn't have been. He was never an option.
So good thing I didn't pick him, because he doesn't qualify. So here I go. I'm going to go Travis Etienne. And
you made the right pick.
I made the correct choice because he qualifies at least. But just too much upside there. Obviously, Travis Etienne, we haven't seen him at all in the NFL, but from his college tape, he's a fantastic running back, great speed, can get to the outside, catches passes nicely as well. He was a guy that started off his college career and was basically afraid of the football, but really came a long way by the end of his time there in college. And at this point, there's not a lot of big play running backs left, so I'm just going to take my chances on Etienne.
One of the most overall productive running backs in college football history. Go ahead, Garrett.
Real quick, before we finish up, I know we got to get out of here, but if you were to make a team just out of the players that didn't get picked, the players that are still left, here's what your team would look like. You ready for this? This is a super flex team, by the way. Starting quarterback, Joe Burrow. Your starting running backs, Josh Jacobs, Cam Akers. Your starting wide receivers, T. Higgins, Chase Claypool, Marquise Brown. Starting tight end, your choice between T.J. Hockenson and Pat Freiermuth. At the flex positions, we'll start David Montgomery and Brandon Ayuk. And then you can have your choice of Trevor Lawrence or Tua Tagovailoa at your super flex quarterback. Those were the players that didn't even make the cut in our first 2 rounds.
Yeah, Hawkinson's the one that you said that really, I was like, okay, when we started, where am I taking Hawkinson? And then I saw Justin Herbert and Kyler Murray. I was like, not yet. Not yet. Can't take them. And I think here's the one thing about Hawkinson, too, is on a team that he's the only receiver, essentially, I expected to see a little bit more out of him. Still really good. A really very good tight end, fantasy football tight end. But I was expecting to see, Travis Kelce numbers.
Yeah, he just didn't have the year, I think, this year to support, him getting taken this high, because a lot of these other players, they have. And we've seen enough that they warranted the picks.
which is, again, he's tight end 3 overall. So it's not,
right.
But, on a points per game point, he's got 145 points. He's fallen into that grouping, right? Where he's got 145, Gesicki's got 137, Dalton Schultz got 136. I expected him to be in like that. Mark Andrews got 179, Travis Kelce's got 189. That's where I kind of expected Hockenson this year. But you're right, Garrett. Tons of good players we're going to talk about. It just shows you how lucky we are in Dynasty today to be saturated with not only youth, but such good quality young players. If you got a Dynasty startup this offseason coming around the corner that you're going to get yourself into, well, not only will Dynasty Nerds help you find a way to draft that great team, just go young, baby. Because a lot of times when you go young, it's like, I'm just going to wait a year or two. Not anymore. You go young right away. You're under the age of 25, and you got yourself a studly Dynasty team because you can win some ships with the players that we all mentioned today. So what a squad. Blessed to have them. We'll be back next week. Good luck, everybody, this week as they make that final push for their Dynasty Fantasy Football playoffs. This is it. This is the final week of the regular season for a majority of your teams. I wish you all the best, and we'll be back next week.
Adios.